And they're for primary schools as well as secondary schools. And I couldn't agree with you more that the work needs to be done. The shocking and appalling thing is that we have police officers here who have received diversity training and information about LGBT people compulsory in your training, wasn't it?
I'm going to ask you to move on, but we do need to allow space for other people to.
So we need to absolutely make sure that this government takes on board that. So please look at the classroom website and please use LGBT History Month. Music this year, history next.
No, you're absolutely right, and there's lots of examples I could have given, and you just can't. What I was also trying to look for were examples that give some evidence about, because that's what often government requires, evidence of change, and it's quite hard to. And that's why I was particularly fascinated by that schools program, because they looked at, and I'm sure it may apply to yours as well, but if you can show changes in attendance and attainment, then you're on really hard ground for saying this is worth doing. And also I think it's really important what you're doing is to do it with the teachers.
Absolutely.
That I think that doing it with the students, all these things I've been talking about in college students, you know, it's very mixed results. People have formed their opinions by the time they're in college.
Yeah.
Question here.
You talked about the higher rates of mental health difficulties in LGBT populations. I'm doing a doctoral thesis on the experiences of LGBT service users in mental health hospitals. But I've struggled to find any other evidence or any evidence of sort of staff training or interventions that are being used within a mental health context. And I just wondered if you knew of any.
Yeah, there has been one that's a group in the Royal College of Psychiatrists did for training mental health service staff. It's very hard to get them to put it into their equalities training and diversity. So there isn't much. No, I completely agree. And there's quite a lot. There's been quite a few reviews about this, as you probably know. We conducted a review ourselves, looking at what sort of psychotherapy and mental health provision has there been for gays and lesbians and what it's about. But we have someone, I don't know.
I think in the 80s, Mind produced a training pack for day centres and mental health hospitals. But it's late 80s, I think it was.
Yeah. Do you want to mention Pink Therapy?
Well, I'm director of Pink Therapy, and we run a lot of training workshops for counsellors and psychotherapists and psychologists, trying to help them become more effective. Yeah. And there are cards around.
Has changed too. I think that mental health staff are much more aware now than they were. But you know, and I think the police are much more aware than they were. So I think things in this country are moving in a really positive direction. And you know, the police in particular are very intolerant of homophobic hate crime. But my worry is that the reporting is still, you know, that somehow the confidence of the lesbian gay community is not that high in terms of reporting it. But not just to the police, reporting it to each other or to their families. That's what's extraordinary.
Dante.
I'm wondering in your review of the research if you came across any correlation between this pressure to prove your heterosexuality in young boys with the over-sexualization of young girls, if there's any sort of relationship between
I don't know. No, I didn't see that. But I guess it's part of that, isn't it? That with that over-sexualization, there's an increasing polarity in how young people define themselves in terms of sexual terms. And that, it's a very strong driving force. Many people don't look so closely at girls in terms of bullying, either they're lesbian girls or gay boys. They just seem to be much less likely. Whereas girls are not less likely to bully. They will bully in all sorts of ways, but usually more verbal and exclusion ways than violence. But it's been much less research on that. And they don't seem to be so worried about the sexual orientation as boys do. It's really very strikingly different.
Question here.
Yeah, I was wondering whether you were aware of any research which had been done within the further education context, because you mentioned primary and secondary, but besides Joan Gray's heteronormative NELT research.
In the further education, so meaning like university or post-university?
Your post-16 education,
yeah.
So FE rather than...
That's where most of the American research has been.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been in colleges and universities. Not much research in this country though. Yeah. There's an awful lot of American research, but some, as I was indicating, some of it's quite badly done. You know, it's kind of, you know, these sort of college projects where they get credits for being part of a research early in the university, and it's not particularly good research. And I think a lot of programs, as that chap from Surrey was showing, a lot of the these things have been introduced, but they haven't been well publicised or well evaluated, unfortunately. I still believe, though, that the wider societal changes are a lot more important than these small interventions. I think teachers are very important, to try and get teachers in making sure attitudes. But the media, outing sports people is so important. I don't know if you saw Justin, what was his name? Yeah, his niece, who did a program on television and tried to find a gay sportsman, male sportsman, and it proved a pretty fruitless task. Not because they're not there, because they're terrified of being open.
One of the Homo World was a DVD produced by University of East London a few years ago, which is a bit like this intervention of Alien World, where they made a little video imagining the world as if homosexuality was normal, and they went around Soho, and there was somebody at work who was coming out as heterosexual, and she was having to move to another town, and would she or not? And it's a really interesting training tool. I've got copies of it if people want to see a copy.
Yeah. I think question. Sorry. Yeah, just very quickly. I think it's a really important thing, because I think a lot of people, even with institutional homophobia, people are not putting themselves in the shoes of gay lesbian people. If you take the Church of England or something, they're not really thinking through when they say that, or in the Catholic Church, when they say priests should just. Well, the Catholic Church is a bit easier because all the priests are celibate, but in the Church of England, where you should just be gay but not have a partner, they're not really putting themselves, the heterosexuals are not really thinking that through. No. I think it's very much the same.
All celibate, and according to my friend Mark Dowd, who's an ex-Catholic priest, all gay as well.
Hi, I'm Derek Leonard. I coordinate Idaho in the UK, or Idahot, or Idahobbit, depending on which recent argument you've been involved in. To say also, first of all, about mental health. The World Health Organization took homosexuality off its list of mental diseases 17th of May 1990. That's why Idaho Day is the 17th of May.
That's good, isn't
so
it?
happy birthday, everybody.
Yeah. Shows the influence of those diagnoses.
Yeah. And very quickly, I was asked about London Idaho events. Just quickly. There's a flash mob at Trafalgar Square at 5 o'clock, the gay marriage. There's two events that I know about this evening. One is about the situation in France for LGBT people, which has been arranged by Birkbeck and Camden LGBT Forum. I think it's at Birkbeck. It's around 6:30. You can find it on the web quite easily. And secondly, the Kaleidoscope Trust have organised a lecture by the world's only trans MP. She's an MP in Poland. Eve, I can't remember her name, I apologise to her. But she's going to talk about transphobia in the world, and that's at the Commonwealth Institute. You do need to, it's free, you need to book a ticket, so look up Kaleidoscope Trust.
We'd hoped to have that lecture here, but we were usurped by the Commonwealth.
And there may be other things that people will reveal to me, which will be great. And just to say very briefly then, that this network, this world network, because that's really what it is, called Idaho, is quite a phenomenon, really. I mean, it's the most decentralised campaign in the world, and yet it's enabled activists now, because I checked this morning, in over 100 countries, to contribute to dealing with homophobia and transphobia in a way that suits them in their country, in their culture, in their religion, whatever it is. And it is 27 African countries are involved, 24 of which homosexuality is illegal. Ethiopia is the recent one that's using Idaho to say to people, including people in the West, by the way, please sign our petition about what's happening in our country, LGBT people. So please look up Ethiopia Rainbow when you get back and sign that petition. But it seems to have a
lot of people trying to get
decentralised campaign that has some status in the UN and other places, and people using that as a hook